and welcome to Across Africa. I'm Georgia Calvin-Smith with our weekly look at stories from across the continent. Coming up in the programme, they humiliated us like animals and beat us like slaves. Cameroon's accused of forcibly repatriating around 100,000 Nigerian refugees. Human Rights Watch claims that some were tortured before being loaded onto trucks and illegally sent back. Also, Chad's out. Jamina expresses bewilderment over being included in a new open-ended US travel ban. And a month and a half after the deadly mudslides that killed hundreds in Sierra Leone's capital, the thousands left homeless by the disaster are still unsure of what comes next. But first, Yaoundé has been accused of breaking international law by forcibly deporting around 100,000 Nigerian refugees. Human Rights Watch says that most are in the country after having fled the Boko Haram insurgency, and that some were tortured by the army before being sent back. Investigators claim that some were so malnourished that they didn't survive the return. Nicolas Chemin tells us more.
Human Rights Watch says it's one of the world's largest recent cases of illegal mass forced return of refugees. In a new report, the NGO says Cameroon has sent 100,000 Nigerians back to their country since 2015. Refugees who'd fled Boko Haram's violence.
The Cameroonian military intercepts them in the border areas, tortures some of them as Boko Haram suspects, beats and abuses others, sexually exploits women, some of whom are accused of being Boko Haram wives.
The Cameroonian government said the report was baseless.
I adamantly reject such an accusation, which I consider to be libelous, to be slanderous, the purpose of which being to discredit, to dishonor our country.
Human Rights Watch said Nigeria was complicit in the forceful returns because it had sent military vehicles to help bring back its citizens from Cameroon. The Nigerian government said it was acting legally.
We have the security agencies involved, and government. A meeting has been going on plan on how, if there's the need to repatriate them, they will be repatriated according to the law.
Earlier this year, the UN Refugee Agency had also said it was concerned by cases of forced returns from Cameroon to Nigeria. It stressed that the conditions in northeast Nigeria do not yet exist to make returns safe and sustainable.
Chad's government has said that it is astonished at Washington's decision to add its name to a list of countries whose nationals are banned from entering the US. Rights groups have fiercely condemned the new open-ended restrictions brought in by the Trump administration. The new look crackdown comes in as a previous 90-day ban on 6 mainly Muslim countries comes to an end. And critics say the intent is still overwhelmingly to prevent Muslim visitors from heading to the US.
It's a radical measure. All Chadian nationals will be barred from entering the United States. What is surprising is that Washington says Idriss Déby's Chad remains an important partner in the struggle against terrorists. But the US adds that Jamina does not share enough information about terrorists. The Chadian government reacted strongly.
We take note of this decision, but the Chadian government cannot comprehend the official reasons backing this decision.
In the streets of the capital, many Chadians were stunned.
I'm very shocked. I don't understand this decision. After all the efforts Chad has made in the struggle against terrorists,
my advice to the Chadian government is that it should now ban Americans from coming here.
Washington says jihadist groups like Boko Haram are operating in Chad. The Trump administration decision surprised some observers because Chad has been at the forefront of the struggle against jihadists, especially in Mali and Nigeria.
Nearly a month and a half after a devastating mudslide killed hundreds of people in Freetown, around 7,000 are still homeless. Immediately after the disaster, many took shelter in empty buildings, churches and schools. Now they're being made to move. But the government hasn't offered a long-term resettlement plan, and many of the survivors feel that they have nowhere else to go. Natasha Bowler and Emerald Maxwell report from Freetown.
School was supposed to start 2 weeks ago, but until this morning, these classrooms were being used as a shelter by survivors of last month's mudslide. Only after the headmistress put pressure on the government were they resettled. The new term can finally begin.
And we are saying there is no space to take the rest of the people. And I said, what do you think we will do? Because we have to use the school. Schools have reopened. What do you think we're going to do?
Elsewhere, survivors are still squatting in empty buildings. This area next to the mudslide is now home to some 600 people who lost their homes.
We're cold. The kids are getting sick. We don't have mattresses and sleep on the bare floor. It's tough.
NGOs are giving victims food, clothing and toiletries. But the government is encouraging these people to move to official camps. There they can benefit from state support. When camps close in mid-November, families will receive $300. But only 52 houses are being built for victims, and it is unclear who will qualify for these few homes.
First of all, you must be a victim of this present disaster. And I think that's the basic requirement. The houses are not going to be built for free, or they are not going to stay in those houses for free. We will institute what we call a mortgage system, as it's done in other countries. Because there is nowhere in the world where houses are built for free and given to people.
For the thousands that won't qualify, their future remains uncertain.
Mauritius has become a hub for the international drug trade. For over a year now, a commission of inquiry has been at work on a strategy for a crackdown. Over the past 11 months, over 2,000 people have been arrested, and seizures, especially of heroin and cannabis, have been ramped up. Our correspondent reports from Port Louis.
Snipers get to their positions around the courthouse where a star witness is due on the stand. This man was arrested after police seized a record amount of heroin. He's now under high security as police try to track down his alleged drug network.
This year has been exceptional in terms of arrests, in terms of seizures, and especially in terms of big cases.
Cité Sainte-Claire in the north of Mauritius. These images were taken by the anti-drug unit during a heavy-handed intervention. In the outskirts of Port Louis, 3 houses were searched, but as soon as the operation ended, the drug dealing resumed. Mauritius leads in economic rankings and is among the safest countries in Africa. However, since 2000, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime ranked the island among the greatest drug users in the world.
We have been witnessing since the past 3 years more and more youngsters who have an early onset of drug use. The youngest was a young girl of 9 years old who was dependent on synthetic cannabinoids.
In an urgent response, the government appointed a commission of inquiry. In 1 year, there were more than 2,000 arrests, including a former magistrate and police officers.
It happens to be a police officer, a civil servant, or any other person, art should not make any distinction.
Politicians, too, are under suspicion. Prime Minister Pravin Jugnauth promises to be merciless and wishes to be heard by the Commission of Inquiry on Drugs.
In DR Congo, a project's underway to try and educate more young people about the realities of what it means to have a baby before you're ready. More than half of the pregnancies in the country are unplanned. Our correspondents report.
Menji is 17 and already pregnant with a 3rd child. Without any money, she's considering having an abortion. Producers of this play know it's a scenario that many Congolese young women in a similar situation may identify with.
We are calling out to young people through this play in order to inform our community that it's important that the teenagers and young adults go to health centres. They need to get viable information regarding contraception.
Congolese authorities, backed by doctors of the world and local NGOs, are trying to raise awareness about the difficulties of pregnancy among Kinshasa's youth. In DR Congo, an estimated 53% of pregnancies are unwanted.
The problem is that sex is taboo in Congolese families. This is why we insist on raising awareness. Teenagers need to know about contraception. They need to understand what sexuality is really about.
In Kinshasa's Selembao neighborhood, young and old gathered to learn what's not being taught at school.
I was at home and I heard a fanfare and a megaphone. The message was interesting, so I went along. Today I learned a lot about pregnancy, but also about sexually transmitted diseases. I feel well informed.
Unwanted pregnancies have a big impact on Congolese women's life and health. They often lead to clandestine abortions. DR Congo has ratified the Maputo Protocol, which allows abortion if women's health is at risk, but it's never been put into practice. Next Thursday, the Minister of Gender will lead a conference on this public health issue.
Well, that's it for Across Africa for now. Thanks very much for joining us. Do so again if you can. Take care.